mentioned that, I don't think he had been actually hitting his BCD and inflating it
to try and compensate for the drag.
For the drag, and so he upends himself and tries to swim down after her, and he said he couldn't make it to her
because he was full of air.
Too buoyant.
Possibly. I'm not totally sure about how much that's true or not. That's one of the parts of the story that really doesn't make sense. This is one of the things I ran past Austin at Aquatic Sports. I said, does that make any sense to you at all, even if his BCD was totally inflated, that he couldn't get down to her, couldn't catch up with her? And he said, no, it makes absolutely no sense at all. Even with an overinflated BCD, that's really weird that he wouldn't be able to give a few kicks of his fins and get down to her. But according to him, he couldn't get to her.
Okay.
And so at that, he had to make a decision. He thought, well, okay, I can keep going after her. She's going to hit bottom here eventually, and then I can catch up with her. But what happens if I hit bottom, and for whatever reason, I can't raise her up off the bottom and get her to the surface? What happens then? Well, then I've got to take that much longer to get up 100 feet versus 50 feet where I'm at about now. I think the greatest depth on his computer was at 54, 55 feet.
Something like that.
Yeah. And so his thinking was, and what he told the police later was, well, okay, if I follow her all the way down and can't get her up, it's going to take me that much longer to get up to the surface.
To get help.
And so maybe it's better if I turn and go for help now. And so that's what he said he did. Is he turned and he headed not just up, but also towards the diver access point at the bow, where he said there were a couple of divers hanging on to it and he went up and tapped them and grabbed them and shook them and tried to gesture and make it clear that there was trouble and all that stuff, and they just sort of looked at him like, what?
Because they're tourists?
Yeah, he said that at least one of them was an Asian guy, and so...
Maybe didn't speak English?
Well, and yeah.
No, I think they're novices. They don't understand the hand signs because he's underwater at this point still, right?
Yeah, and he was just trying to... he was just trying to say, he had no idea exactly who these divers were, and so the only identifying characteristics you could see is you could see a couple of Asian eyes looking at him through out of the mask, and so that's about it as far as describing these people.
Okay.
And of course later on they identified a few Koreans that were on the Jazz too, who neither one of them actually remembered this incident, which was didn't look so good for Gabe when it turns out. Yeah, it doesn't look that good. So he gives up on trying to get them to help, so he continues on upwards. And when he gets there, he yells at the boat and says his wife is gone down and she's in trouble, and the alarm goes up, and the guy gets on his radio. People on the boat start suiting up and getting ready to go down for a search and rescue. But as it happens, Wade Singleton comes along and notices somebody laying on the ocean floor next to the ship.
And thinks that's wrong.
And thinks, yeah, exactly. Something's a little hinky there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, something about her body language and the fact that she's not moving. So he goes over there and shakes her a little bit, and nothing's going on. So he grabs her and hits her BCD button to inflate it as much as he can, and they head on up. And they took about, I think, a minute and a half to ascend to the 100 feet, which my understanding is that's a kind of a breakneck pace to go up from 100 feet.
Yeah.
In scuba terms.
Well, yeah, but it makes sense.
In an emergency circumstance.
It was an emergency circumstance. But for Wade, obviously for Tina at this point, she was dead. Not to give away the game, but oh well, I already have. So, but for him, it was a risk. It was a big risk. But he got her up there, and they spent about 40 minutes, I think, trying to resuscitate her. The nearest boat was the Jazz 2, so they took her over to the Jazz 2, and turns out there were a couple of doctors that happened to be just diving on the boat, and they got them over there to help out with some of this, and after everything they did, they gave up after about 40 minutes.
But Gabe wasn't on that boat. He ended up on a different boat.
He ended up back on the Spoil Sport. Yeah, he was back on the Spoil Sport, standing in the stern of it, and a lot has been made of that. Is that he was on the Spoil Sport. His wife is on the Jazz, and they're trying to resuscitate her. And what's he doing, hanging out on the Spoil Sport when she's over there and dying, apparently? And so, well, that is a question, I guess.
Yeah, but he didn't know exactly where she was.
He might not have known. Yeah.
And it's not as if they're going to say, quick, send the dinghy over, bring the distraught husband over so he can get in the way while we try to resuscitate this woman.
Well, I don't know that would be high on their list of things to do.
I'm afraid not.
Probably not.
I also think if you have somebody who's distraught, you're not necessarily going to say, let's move this person. You're going to say, let's try to keep this person here and calm, because if you try to move this person, you risk having more than one victim.
That's always possible.
Because, if he jumps in and, tries to swim there, but he's panicking or whatever, you have to minimize the victims.
Yeah, and so that's what was going on. It didn't look so good from some people's points of view, I suppose. And there were a lot of different statements that were made, some of which are rather apocryphal. There were many weird things. A lot of his story didn't make sense. And then there was, one of the local Australian police overheard him there was a body viewing at the coroner's. They had to identify the body, and they left him with her body for a little while. And a policeman overheard him mumbling to her, "I'm so sorry, and I never meant to hurt you, and I shouldn't have kept taking you down, and I'm sorry, I couldn't stop it." That's what the police said, Gabe said, to Tina's body.
All those statements go both ways.
Yeah, kind of.
Let's talk about that in theories, maybe.
Yeah, maybe. And so that's where we're at. It went on. It was originally classified as an unfortunate accident. There was, of course, an investigation anyway, but it was still classified as an accident. But then one of the divers, actually, that was on the boat, remembered feeling a little at the time, feeling a little bit uneasy about the situation, and thinking that after talking to her, it just didn't make any sense. And when he got back to the States, he looked up Tina's father, Tommy Thomas, and they arranged a little meeting, and this guy tells Tommy all the doubts that he had in his mind about this whole thing. And of course, the Thomas family, they've been kind of wondering about this whole situation for a long time now. This sort of gelled things for them, and they started this campaign to get the Australians to reopen the investigation. Eventually, so compressing a lot of stuff into a small amount of time, they did. They re-interviewed a lot of people. They had an inquest and everything, and they decided to indict Gabe for murder, because the theory being that he had... Oh, and I forgot about, there was another doctor, Dr. Stutz, who also, of course, this was sometime after the fact when he was interviewed. He testified that he spotted Gabe and Tina underwater, because he followed them into the water later. He saw them, and Gabe was holding Tina in a bear hug.
Oh yeah,
underwater.
I forgot about the bear hug thing.
The bear hug, and so the police's theory is that he grabbed her, cranked off her air supply, and basically held her in that bear hug, so that she couldn't get to the surface or do anything. And then once she had died and drowned and everything, he turned her air supply back on so everything would look okay, and let her just drop, and concocted this whole ludicrous story about how it was all a horrible accident when he had actually murdered her. And by the way, it turns out there was some life insurance money involved. Yeah, a decently large amount. According to Tina's dad, she said that not long before the wedding, she had told him that Gabe wanted her to increase the amount of her life insurance and also make him the beneficiary of it.
Well, they were about to be married, so the beneficiary thing makes sense.
It kind of does, yeah.
And I don't know, maybe the increases make sense too.
Yeah, it might.
Yeah, I mean, there's a whole bunch of reasons to change it. I mean, I don't know what his reasonings were, but again, this is one of those things. Can be very innocent or very, very...
It can look kind of bad. I think the way it was set up is where she was working. And I used to have a job that was like this. You could get the minimum, basically, employer paid. You get the minimum life insurance. And that's what she was doing. And he just said, well, it doesn't cost that much in premiums. You should bump that up. You really should. It doesn't cost all that much. And you get a lot huger benefit out of the whole thing. And so I don't know that he actually pressured her, if he just sort of set it offhand one day. You ought to increase that. It wouldn't cost you that much. And so I don't know exactly how. Again, that we have Tina's father for this. Tina never, as far as I know, she never told anybody else about this. So we only have his word for the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
Turns out that the life insurance did actually play a role in the prosecution.
So this is in Australia?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is the Australian prosecution, which is now charging him with murder.
So are we in theories or?
Not quite.
No, this is still, we haven't even got to theories. This is what happens.
Yeah, this is what happened. And I'm compressing it as much as I can. I mean, this story is pretty huge, actually. It was a huge sensation, especially in Australia, but even it generated some news up here, too, in the States. But turns out the policy was worth about $33,000.
Not a lot.
So that was not a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Annual salary.
Yeah, essentially. So, and Gabe was not the beneficiary of it. Hard to say if that was a sufficient motive or not. Sounds like not to me. But that did play a part in the prosecution's reasoning. That was the motive for doing it.
Oh, that he was mad that he wasn't the beneficiary?
No, that maybe he was mistakenly believed that she had jacked up the amount and had made him the beneficiary, but he was too careless apparently to check before they left for the honeymoon.
That would be a jacked up amount for me. Like, I 33? Have the similar situation as you were talking about, that my employer pays a certain amount, and it's not $33 a year, but I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I have a definite amount that I will murder somebody for. 33.
It's not 33.
No, not 33. No, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, no. And by the way, you guys, I've been meaning to talk to you about life insurance.
So he is convicted in Australia?
They knocked it down. He essentially negotiated a plea for manslaughter. So he returned voluntarily to Australia to stand trial for the charges and basically agreed to plead guilty to manslaughter and was sentenced to like a year in prison. Okay. And then it was lengthened to about a year and a half because the family was upset. The Thomases were upset.
So he spent a year and a half?
So he spent, a certain amount of time in Australian prison. And eventually was, after he got out, he was deported and sent back to the States. And the Australians had, meanwhile, a lot of the investigation actually had been, what's the word I'm thinking of here, at the aegis of Alabama police. Essentially, somebody
done at the behest of.
Yeah, at the behest of the Tommy Thomas got in touch with the local police in Alabama and spelled the whole thing out to them. And so they had actually gone. The Alabama police had lit a fire under the Australians a little bit, ginned up interest over there, gotten their conviction. Now he's back. They want to try him for murder here in the States, which in their theory was, well, this looks like a coldly calculated, well-planned out murder. So he must have planned this back here in Alabama. Therefore, we can prosecute him for murder, even though it took place halfway around the world. So they were they were going to take him to trial and try to convict him of murder. And apparently the judge threw it all out.
Yeah, they had no case.
Yeah, essentially the judge said, "What are you doing here?
Yeah.
You got no case." Okay, so that's where it is. Gabe has since remarried. His new wife is not dead.
She does look a lot like Tina.
Well, that's not surprising. We all have a type, right?
Yeah,
it's not.
I know.
Yeah,
I threw that out there just because I see it everywhere, and people just get excited over that.
Imagine that first date, though. It's like, oh, you ever been married? Oh, yeah, she died. What happened? Oh, she died on her honeymoon. Everybody thinks I killed her. I didn't, I swear. But they call me the honeymoon killer, just so you know. But apparently they made it past that little hump and wound up getting married. Mm-hmm. And she's, like I said, still alive. So that's about it. There's a lot more out there if you want to do more research on our little mystery. There's tons of stuff out there. It's time for us to get into theories, but before we do that, let us take a really brief break. Take a look at me now.
The roof is leaking.
I'm just standing here.
Oh, think twice.
You know what I mean.
Another day in paradise.
If leaving me is easy, I missed again.
Tomorrow never knows.
Do you know what any of that means? Yeah, me neither. You should probably pick up a copy of Not Dead Yet by Phil Collins so he can explain it. Or, better yet, why don't you get it from Audible and let him read the book himself? I mean, who doesn't love to just sit around and listen to that guy all day? Yeah, well, there is the past Mrs. Collins, but that's just not fair. So go to Audible. Audible just launched the first ever binge listening event, and you are invited to binge on great listens and big savings with their biggest sale ever. Enjoy the benefits of Gold Audible membership, celebrity narrated Audible books, new podcasts, and audio shows, exclusive content, and more. A $50 savings since Audible's annual membership retails for $149.95.
The sale ends June 28,
2017. Learn more at audible.com/binge.
Okay, we're back. Time to talk about theories. There are essentially three theories here. One is, murder. That's the prosecution's theory. He killed her. And it's not surprising to me that some people were a little suspicious because a lot of parts of Gabe's story really didn't actually make a lot of sense. Like the part about not being able to catch up with her when she was sinking underwater. Mm-hmm. I mean, that didn't make a huge amount of sense to me. Of course, as you know, is awfully suspicious about the insurance policy thing and wanting her to bump up the amount and all that stuff.
Of course, we know that really amounts to nothing.
Mm-hmm. There's also that talk about Gabe's controlling personality. And so maybe after a week in Australia, maybe something or another caused Gabe to sort of think that, well, Tina is just a little wild stallion that'll never be tamed, and so I've got to kill her, right?
Silly,
wow.
But yeah.
Right, yeah. Or maybe she flirted with some handsome Australian dude, and he went nuts with jealousy and decided to kill her.
Yeah, she met Paul Hogan.
Yeah. And I got to say about this part is that if he was the total controlling sort of person, manipulative, controlling, whatever, and he found somebody that was willing to put up with that, I wouldn't have thought he would have killed her.
I'd agree.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Like that's a find.
Yeah.
Another thing is the battery malfunction in his dive computer. Again, what we talked about.
Yeah.
The fact that he reversed the battery but it was beeping before and now it's working. Well, apparently the prosecution didn't actually trouble themselves
to try
to figure out exactly how the thing worked. Actually, there's another website that's out there that's got a fantastic amount of information about this case. It's actually written by a professional diver. And he explains all the whole battery thing. But apparently, the prosecution made much of this. They really said that was part of their theory, is that he wanted to murder her, he planned it out, and he faked a malfunction in his dive computer so that he could get her by herself and not go down with all those other divers.
Well, then there's they also figured he was doing something weird or murder, was guilty. Proof of his guilt was shown in the fact that he always got so upset about all the stuff on her gravesite, all the flowers, and he kept hauling them away.
Yeah, her family would leave flowers there, and he would, and they kept disappearing.
And then somehow they chained him or tied him down.
They started wiring him down, cabling him down and stuff, and then they would still disappear. And they finally put a closed circuit, like a camera out there, and turns out Gabe was busted. He was the one removing the flowers.
I don't think there's anything to that, though, because he may have thought that it was highly disrespectful, because this is something I have friends that refer to like where there's an accident and people leave memorials and balloons and all of that, and then nobody takes that down, and 3 or 4 weeks later it's all wilted. Well, they call them, my friends refer to those as trash trees.
Yeah.
And so he may have said, "You jerks, why are you turning my dead wife's grave into a trash tree and removing it?"
That's the thing I don't know. It's like some of the stuff they left was plastic artificial flowers, which he thought were tacky and ugly. As far as the other flowers, I don't know if he was removing fresh roses or if they were like a week old and kind of dead looking. I don't know. Yeah, I really don't. But apparently, a lot was made of that, and I don't know what to make of it myself personally. But and there's also the fact maybe he just did it out of pure spite. And a lot of us, let's face it, we can be a perfectly decent person and not murderers and still be kind of petty.
Yeah.
That happens. It does happen. Well, of course, there was the other thing. The agents on the entry line up at the bow.
Koreans?
Those 2 Koreans. He said he talked to a couple of Asian people, but when the police went back and interviewed everybody, the only Asian people that were out there that day didn't remember any incident.
Okay, but nobody. We're saying they interviewed and nobody remembered, or just specifically the 2 Koreans didn't remember, because it's possible he mistook their race.
Right.
So did they ask everybody?
Well, the way they went about the whole thing is they didn't necessarily track down like everybody from say the Jazz 2. They didn't. I think they got a hold of these Koreans. I think they might have interviewed them via email. I don't think it was actually a one-on-one email.
I think that's suspicious. I just think it's not. I think they didn't do their due diligence.
That's entirely possible that they bungled that a little bit. It's also entirely possible that the Asians maybe at the time, this guy is all disturbed, and they're like, "What the hell, dude? We're on vacation. Leave us alone."
Yeah.
And then afterwards, they hear what happened. Mm-hmm. Oh my God, somebody drowned. That's what's their husband. Oh man, I feel really bad. Mm. And so maybe they were just kind of embarrassed to talk about.
Don't say anything out of guilt.
This guy desperately needed our help, and we blew him off. Oh, yeah. I feel kind of bad about that.
Yeah.
You know? So maybe I really don't. Or it could have just been memory, because I don't think these people were contacted for quite some time after the actual drowning.
It does seem like you would remember that, but again, it's so I have friends who are friends with people, and they said, "Oh yeah, his mom's Chinese," and that guy's like, "No, I'm German, like 100% German."
Yeah.
But they think he's half of some sort of Asian descent, and
Yeah.
I mean, identifying race is just impossible.
Well,
I
it
mean,
could have been that these people they had their masks on, and the masks were just clamped down a little too tight, and it was sort of pulling their face like this to make their eyes kind of
Look a little
narrower.
Under
Yeah.
pressure.
You know,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Who knows?
So
Who
okay,
knows? But
Well, there's the whole bear hug